Good afternoon, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to today's session. I can see all of you are books in the making because within each one of us is a feeling, a thought, a history, and a human being whose story is ready to be told to the book, to the world of books, and to the world in general. So I'd really like to welcome Mohamed Kharwa out here. He is been an executive member of the Booksellers Association for many years as vice president, executive member, and president. And the thing which really resonates with people is somebody who can help them to reach their goal. Firstly, how to write the book, which they need help with, but also the marketing of the book itself. But firstly, I'd like to ask Mohammed, how did he get into reading and the world of books?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me here, and thank you to the team. I mean, it's really always exciting to come to the Durban International Book Fair and to see people and to meet people who are passionate about books. How did I get into reading? I think, like most people, parents make a very, very big impression. I grew up in a house where my dad read a lot, which I think nowadays is not as common. People don't always see their fathers reading as much as they probably should. And because of that, you kind of get into that environment where you feel and you value the reading. It's something which, as an industry, we've been trying to raise that. One of the things we want to kind of get out there is parents reading to children. Even from the point where the child is unable to actually understand, there's research that has shown that a child goes to school familiar with 700,000 more books if their parents read to them. And I used to always say it's 70,000 until I went back and I checked. And it's actually not that they know the words, they don't know the meaning, but they're familiar with it, they've heard it, they can construct it, deconstruct it. And that's critical. So growing up in a home where that happened, kind of had the passion for books. How did I end up in the industry is a whole different story.
That will be an interesting story indeed, because Mohammed is also a pharmacist. So, you see nowadays you talk about left brain, right brain, and Mozart, he was very right brain, but he also was very good with his left brain, logic. So both logic and music, creativity, they go hand in glove with each other. So as being a pharmacist and having this love of reading and spreading the knowledge really, because how did this come about?
We all end up with different career paths, and I tell young people especially that, where your future and where you're going to end up is not necessarily something you can write down on a piece of paper and just follow. Right? Mm-hmm. So yes, I was a pharmacist. I went into industry. I went into management consulting. From there, I worked with MTN, doing a lot of work on technology as well. But in that process, my parents actually took over a bookstore from someone who was planning to close it down. Not because it wasn't viable, but he just didn't have the resources to do it. And they invested the time and passionate about books and education especially. They kind of grew the bookstore, and it got to a point when I was in Johannesburg, my daughter was about to start school, and I looked at it and I said, this is the opportunity for me to make a decision. Either I'm going to spend the rest of my life as a Joburger in the cold away from the family, or I'm going to make that choice to come down to Durban and also give the opportunity to be able to build a business. So it was an optimal point, got involved in there, we've grown it, we've established the business, we've brought in technology. My sister's been critical in that process as well, but we've had a foundation from my parents. And I think the slight difference is that when you're passionate about learning, you actually then do it with a very different intention. It's not just a business. One of our colleagues, the MD of one of the larger bookstore chains, I sat with him at one of our meetings and on a flight the one day, and he says, I could sell a lot more books or I could actually take all the books out of my university bookstores, and I could put in alcohol, and it would make 10 times more money. But I sleep better at night knowing I'm changing people's lives, and I'm changing futures, not just for them, but for the next generation thereafter.
That's fantastic. And here I'd also like to acknowledge Anivesh Singh, who's sitting here in the audience. He started #books and the book fair, and also the booksellers of Mazansi project, in which homeless people buy books for 2 rand or 3 rand, and it is also done under the guidance of the Dennis Hurley Center. And then these booksellers, they actually sell the books to the public, and many of them, homeless people, have now got a very good standard of living. Some of them are renting apartments and homes and sending money back to their families, whether they're the families in South Africa or the rest of Africa, but they are earning a living, and that has been because of the project started by Anivesh, and it's called #books, and the booksellers are called the Booksellers of Manzi. And so also, as Mohamed is saying, like you see with the youth, reading books plus helping people, because when you are reading, you have an opportunity to grow as an individual, and you learn things not about yourself only, about fiction and the world of imagination, creativity, but also authors and poets have the ability to earn a living and spread a message to the world.
I think that's something where a key part of what today's discussion is about, is the fact that it's the crossing the line between the creativity and the exchange of ideas, and it has to actually also be able to be financially rewarding. It would be great if everything was free in the world, but it's not. I spoke at the National Reading Summit, and I said, people want to give away free books, but it's not free. Even free education is not free. It's taxpayer funded, it's donor funded, it's Bursa funded. So when we talk about free books, somebody's paying for it. It's just not necessarily the person who's taking it away. And we've got to be able to recognize that there's got to be a commercial viability to all of these projects. So the only thing in free, I joke about it, is the only thing free in the world at the moment is the air that we breathe. Even the water we've got to pay for, right? So taking that into context, you cannot start the process and say, oh, well, this is knowledge. Somewhere along the line, somebody's got to earn a fair, reasonable, and decent living from it. Now, that's, I think, the big challenge here, is that what we're finding in South Africa is that we don't have a book buying culture. And that's the biggest problem. So there's some stats. I'm a numbers person. That's the scientist in me, all right? It's not only about how many milligrams of what you need to take in your, with your tablets, right? It's the numbers. And being a data person, if we want to make decisions, we should make it based on real data. So here's some of the real data that underlies where the industry problem lies. 80% of our kids in grade 4 can't read. That's the Department of Education statistic, right? People in this audience are probably familiar with it, right? They can read words, milk, tea, a sentence, a paragraph, a tweet, but they're not reading paragraphs and books and chapters to absorb knowledge, to be able to frame new ideas out of it, to be able to think out of it. That's a huge problem. Because what does that mean in another, 8 years' time? They're writing matric, or they should be writing matric. Well, the other Department of Basic Education stat is that out of 100 kids who start grade 1, around 64 drop off at grade 10. So the number writing matric is not that 84. We've already knocked off probably most of that 84, because what we're finding is when that child gets to grade 6 and grade 7, they just can't manage. They're not going to be able to cope. When you get to grade 10, the drop off is we now move into very, very specialized subjects, and it comes into application. So numeracy in South Africa or everywhere in the world is a function of literacy. You can't solve the problem sum. I had 2 cakes, I had 4 cakes, how many do I have left? If you don't understand how the reading works and you don't get the comprehension right. So that's the first part of the problem, is that we've got one end of the scale, we're not creating new readers. Second part of that problem is when we do create those readers, we're creating a very small slice. We're also not feeding the culture of knowledge is something I need to buy. So there's this massive problem we've got in the country, especially in South Africa, where let's share the PDF. And what that means is that all the people who've contributed and earned their livelihood from them, I've used this example, the guy who is the security guard for the warehouse where the book is stored, earns his income from the book sale. Maybe not directly, but that's where he earns his income. We don't have people who will walk into a supermarket and steal food because I'm a student. But the same student will share a PDF of the book and take money away from the author. Now, we've had discussions and there have been engagements where people said, oh, if I, it's education, it's knowledge, whatever, and I'd rather be, share the PDF than not. But it does have an impact. And where this impact is now coming down to is we don't have a book buying culture, so nobody wants to write. So here's another statistic. In South Africa, around 25% of the population are Zulu speaking or within the Nguni group of languages. Afrikaans as a first language is only about 12%. If you look at book sales in South Africa, and this is part of the marketing part of this, is we get, you submit your data through to Nielsen Book Data, which is a global body. They actually record what is being sold. They then go and they cross-reference and say, well, which are the best-selling books in South Africa? Every year, without fail, in the top range of books in South Africa are Afrikaans books. I don't remember seeing any indigenous language book appearing in our book data as being one of the best-selling books. So if 20% of people are not reading, or 20% of the population are speaking a language as a first language, and nobody's buying in those languages, who's going to write there?
Now, so we've heard all this data, but as parents and individuals, we want to promote the culture of reading and buying books. And we do buy, through these book fairs as well, authors, readers, they get an opportunity to meet the authors and to buy their books. Now, all of you out here would be interested to know basically what Mohamed has to say, because when a person's writing a book, the biggest question is how to get the book out in the market. So there's a question between vanity publishing, like paying the publisher and getting it published, being self-published, or going the traditional route. The traditional route is not easy also, because your manuscript, you normally send it to so many different publishers. So I'd like you, Mohamed, to talk a little bit about the publishing process.
Okay.
And tell our authors, I can see Keshri is here, she is an author, she's written 2 books. And one of them I have bought, and the other one, she is, we are still to go around and look at all the books which are on display out here. So please tell us about.
Okay, so when trying to figure out how I'm going to approach this from the perspective of sharing the experience and the knowledge, right? One of the things I did was I said, okay, let's go back to good old-fashioned basic marketing principles. And normally, and maybe let's start with that, is that you've got to start off with the process of what is the objective. You mentioned vanity writing. I could write a diary, and it could be brilliant, but I keep it in my cupboard. I don't. I write lots and lots of WhatsApp posts, very long ones according to my friends and everything else. But I could write it. In the old days, a person wrote it in a diary, and then it might have been brilliant writing, but people find it after they're gone, or 20 years later, some grandchild picks it up and says, let's publish this. And it's valuable. But then you also have the other scale, as you said, the vanity publishing, where somebody goes in and says, I want my story to be told. And I'm doing it because I think I'm important, right? And yes, it can still be very, very interesting, and it can have a market, etc. But it comes down to what is your intention. If you're writing for yourself, then don't necessarily think that everybody out there is going to first be coming in and say, oh, well, I'm interested in what you have to say. You might be appealing to a particular market. The other end of the scale is a person who says, I am writing to make this my living. In South Africa, we've got people like Dion Meyer. He earns his living out of writing books. He's not very well known because his primary language of writing is Afrikaans. And then his books get translated into German, and I think in about 8 or 9 different languages around the world. Apparently, he's so popular in Germany that when he goes and walks into a restaurant, people recognize him.
Okay, that's interesting.
And he's consistently produced books. His books have now have been turned into series, short series. I think HBO or one of them are doing a new one on one of his books. But it comes down to he writes for an audience. He earns his living doing this. But for that to happen, there've got to be people who are willing to pay for it. Now, this is where sometimes I think when people go self-publishing, they look at the publisher as a person who's extracting from the process. But a publisher has a very different role. Publisher's role is to quality control the product, vet whether or not there is a market for it, look at whether or not it is prepared and presented in the right format for what it is being used for. Then they've got to get the marketing machine going. But ultimately, the best person to sell a book is the author. I cannot explain. I mean, we've had this question recently. I came across something. Somebody wrote in the 1970s or something to a whole lot of authors and said, I'm having an argument with my lecturer about whether or not in this book you said this and what was your underlying meaning. So he sent a letter out, back then written letters typed out, to a whole lot of authors, and he said, what do you have hidden meanings, and what are the hidden meanings? And some of them replied and said, well, actually we write things. You find a hidden meaning in it that actually wasn't there. So again, it comes down to, that's where the publisher kind of interprets it, looks for the market, does the marketing. Distribution is a massive issue. When it's a physical book, it's a massive, massive issue, because if you cannot get the book out to where the people are, it doesn't actually sell. Nobody knows. There are probably millions of better books than maybe, some of the popular ones. Sometimes I refer to these things as bubblegum books, right? Which are common. People like, Dan Brown's not necessarily the most, from a writing perspective, but his stories appeal, his style appeals. So you've got to decide where you're writing and where you're going to. And the publisher has a critical role to play. When people self-publish, they think they are disintermediating a cost structure. What they dismediate or intermediating from the process is a critical part of the step. And that comes down to the same thing with booksellers and retailers. If you go through to a bookstore, you go there to be able to check what you want. Booksellers have a role in curating content. You go to a fantasy bookstore and one that's aligned to young adults, you'll find very different content there versus if you go to one which is about Africana content or history. They're curating the content. They get the content, they look at it and say, I think this will sell. But that comes at a massive cost. So if you say, you walk into exclusive books as a big chain, or any of the others, bargain books, and you walk into Gateway down the road, right? And you look at the space that they've got, and you look at how many books they've got. You're probably looking at easily, I would guess, probably about 25,000 different books on their shelves. And I'm just guessing here. It could be even way more than that, right? If those books are 200 Rand each, what's the stock holding? How much do they have to insure the space? How much do they have to pay in rent? And they are keeping all that so that you and I can walk in and find what we are looking for. They organize it. Then they have to train their people to be able to answer the question and say, I'm looking for something on gardening, or on, a young adult who's dealing with death, or, somebody who wants something about success. Or that's the skill that people bring into that. And when you say, okay, now I'm going to cut out step 1, I'm going to cut out step 2, it doesn't mean that you're now going to be able to say, well, I'm just going to be able to manage this by putting things out on TikTok. So when I was talking about it, I said there's 4 P's in marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. And anything that you want to get out into a market, even if you're giving it away for free, still follows exactly the same 4 steps. Price there is not necessarily price where somebody may be paying, but somebody's obviously funding it, right? And you've got to have to put it out there. But if we start with the product, is the product working for the target audience? You write a children's book, but you write it in different formats, it means different things. Why is it that we know that children's books come in those hard cardboard type? Because that's what works for them. We want to have textures in some of them. We've got to have big, bold, pictures. I had one of the reps come in and somebody self-published a book, and I said, well, would you consider taking this out to the market? He says, let me show you something. The first half of the pictures are very well, drawn, but the second ones, in his words, are googly eye pictures. They don't relate to the first half. They don't relate to the content. You want something so you've got to write to that. If you want something that's cartoonish, then you draw the cartoon pictures, but then the text has got to be in that format. You don't use Times New Roman. And when authors and when self-published authors get in, start that process, they don't see that.
But now the problem is, for a lot of people really who want to publish, and they go to the traditional publishers, as you say, they often just get rejected because sometimes the publishers take a very long time to reply to them. Mm-hmm. Or secondly, they just they don't really know, is it going to be accepted? And when it's rejected, then what?
It's a lot like dating, right? You go out there and you meet people, and then sometimes you get rejected because it doesn't fit their expectation, or they just didn't take the time to figure what you bring to the relationship, right?
Now
so it's not
again say the same thing, but yes. So say for example, I'm an author. Yeah. I want to get published. I think I've written a fantastic story. It's teaching people things. It's talking about myself, my experiences, which should be relatable to a lot of people all over the world. Now I think that I've gone to a publisher, I've got rejected. Then I've gone to several more. Yeah. So now once that rejection process is over, then I have to think. Now, I still have this feeling that, yes, my story needs to be told. Yeah. Now I get my book published. So now that's the next step. So for authors who have self-published, how do they get their work distributed besides social media?
So that's the key challenge, and that's maybe where we start talking about this. People don't buy a book based on just what the words are or what the message is. All right, we don't buy anything on that basis. We buy on our eyes. There's a very, very interesting TED talk on a guy who's earns and who's a professional book cover designer. That's all he does. That's his primary job. He designs covers. If you got the wrong cover, it's not going to stand out. It's not going to catch attention.
Yes.
Right. So that's the eye part of buying it. Second part is how and what is it appealing to, and how do you catch the person's attention? It's the back end of the book. What have you put down? Now, I haven't even gone into the actual social media or the marketing or the messaging. That's again where all of the marketing and the sales stuff actually happens. The marketing and sales stuff starts off with getting the person number one to walk up to a counter, see it, pick it up, look at it and say, interesting, I think I'll pay money for it. Whether it's at a book fair, whether it's in a bookstore, or whether it's on a website. So that's the first foundation. The next thing is, how did you get people to know about it? Now, I double-checked this when I was coming. There's about 425,000 petabytes of data created every day. That's like 142 million terabytes of data created every day.
I think I won't be wrong in saying that everyone, when you said that word, they were wondering
what is that, right? We know terabyte, right? Yeah. So we know terabyte. That's one hard drive on your laptop. Now take 425 or 142 million of these things and stack them up and say that's how much of data we're creating every day. Part of that data is people who are writing books, okay, or creating content, whether it's poetry like you do, or whether it is videos, TikToks, whatever it may be, right? 90% of that, according to what I checked, was created in the last 2 to 4 years. 90% of that created in the last 2 to 4 years. this is the crowded market you're going into. So one of the challenges that we have is there's more and more content being created. It's much easier to create content now than it was in the past. Right? Anybody with a laptop can start creating content. But it comes down to what is the quality, what is the market need. So when we start talking about the product, you've got to start off with what is the product, what are you selling, what are you bringing to the market. And sometimes your content is very good. It's not necessarily something anybody wants to pay for, or it's talking to a very small market. If I decide I want to write I always joke about this, say, pharmacists never get headline billing in any movies. If we do, we're the person who compounds takes the drug and makes it into something to go and kill someone. We never like the star of the movie, right? But if I decide I want to write one where I'm the star of the story, who's going to read it and what am I doing? Am I pitching it to pharmacists? Am I pitching it to people in healthcare? Am I pitching it to people who are like me? But what am I talking to, right? So the product itself is the first part of this. And sometimes the rejection is not unfounded.
Who's the target audience?
Who's the target audience? And a publisher can own, they're in business. In fact, speaking to publishers, most publishers will tell you that they publish 80% of their content, or maybe even now 90 to 95% of their content, just because they like the story and they want it to be out there. They only really make money from about 5% of the product. Speaking to the CEO of one of our big chains, he said, we still make most of our money from about 20 to 40 different books. 20 to 40 different books. So you walk into your big box bookstore, you see all of these books, they actually are paying the rent, doing everything from between 20 and 40 books. Everything else that they sell is actually what goes into the rest of the expenses. And that's where you've got to start with, is the product has to work for that. So it's one thing to say I'm writing, and this is maybe where the vanity projects come in, where you have someone, recently we had one of the politicians who had someone write a book, and then it came out that it was ghostwritten, and it was like, not independent enough, and it was basically a fluff piece. That was propaganda, all right? And there's tons of that out there. I'm sure that there's a whole lot of people who are doing Donald Trump books right now because he'll be very, very happy about how, right, about the ego. And we all have that, all right? So the product is the core. You can't start off by saying, I'm going to start writing today, and then figure out 600 pages later, 6 months down the line, and then say, well, actually, I didn't write to anybody. If you're going to want to be an author from a commercial perspective. Otherwise, you are writing something for yourself or for somebody, and you're putting it out there for free.
So on that note, let's take some audience questions as well, because Mohamed also has some slides he wants to show.
No, I'll talk to it from here this time. I'll skip that slide one. But yeah.
Okay, let's have any questions from the audience? Who's written the book out here? Geshri? And
yes.
What's your name?
Irupa.
Okay. Any of you would like to have any questions for Mohamed?
No, not yet.
In terms of marketing, so I write empowerment books, emotional healing, emotional empowerment, stuff like that, with a little bit of spirituality, not religion, but spirituality. I've written it for my clients. I've written it for people who need to find their truth, stand in their truth. So basically that has been my market, and I've put it, and I've also been working with that kind of work internationally. So when I wrote my first book, I did not expect it to spread so widely. So it went international, and I'm telling you my experience. It's not, it was the manner in which my first book, it was very organic. It was like, this book will reach the person who needs it.
Yes.
And if it had not been for Anivesh offering me a soft launch in one of his, at a book fair, I doubt I would have even had a launch.
Yep.
And that book has just gone, everywhere. I think every country, or there are countries in every continent that book is sitting and locally. My second book is launching. I've got it here, but it's officially launching on Sunday at midday. Yeah, it's along the same lines but different content. We've got it in exclusive books at the moment, and you know.
So I'm gonna talk to 2 or 3 things from there, right? And I'm gonna go back to the 4 P's that we're talking about, right? So number 1, that opportunity to launch your book is promotion.
Yes.
Right? The in-between thing is price. If you decided you want to price that book at 50 rands, 100 rand, 500 rand, or 1,000 rand, that's going to influence the decision that person's going to make about whether they're going to buy the book or not. They might want to read it, but if it is overpriced, that's a different matter. If a person, I said this to the ex-minister Ismail Wadi when he writes for the Mohamed Kharwa Foundation. He was one of the people who was involved in writing our constitution, longest-serving member of parliament, an absolute person who was dedicated to the country and to freedom and all of that, right? So he's got a wealth of history. And I said to him, and his argument was books are too expensive. And I said, the book is only as expensive as the willingness of the person to read it. I can take a book, I can market it 50 rands. If the person doesn't want to read it, they're not going to pay you 50 rand for it. And I can market it 700 rand. If they want to read it, they'll either chip in with friends or whatever it is, and they'll find a way to get the book, or they'll find a way to go and get it from the library. It's about whether the person wants to read it. So price is one factor. The promotion part of it is a huge part of the problem that we've got. One of the challenges we've got on promotion is you decide you want to have a book launch at an exclusive books. But here's the reality. Durban, international publishers no longer want to bring authors through to Durban. If they do come, they'll go to Cape Town and they'll go to Johannesburg. Why? It's not very different from the reason why the guys who do the concert promotions will host it in Cape Town and Johannesburg and skip Durban. And I've joked with friends, I said the only shows in Durban that ever get popular where we are comedy. We want to see Trevor Noah, we want to see Poseidon Note, we have a comedy show everybody wants to come, because it comes down to whether we're prepared to go and pay for it.
Yes.
So if you want to do a book launch, technically you're probably better off doing your book launch in Cape Town or Johannesburg than you are in Durban. And that comes at a cost. And that comes at an investment. So it's a lot more around, we want to market the book, but we want to market it sometimes where it's convenient for us, where it's easy for us. And we then expect on the other end of the scale to make our marketing problem the bookseller's problem. Why is the bookseller not carrying my book? But until you go there and sit there and tell people, or you do something about it, nobody's going to come and ask for it. We've had situations where people come and ask for book talk is a whole new space to discuss, right? A lot of the book talk books are books which have been around for a very, very long time. They kind of disappeared, they weren't popular, and then somebody goes in and talks about it, and then, I stopped at a bookseller in Norway. I met with the Booksellers Association head when I was in Norway, and we went in a massive section, book talk. And I spoke to the bookseller and he said, well, people walk in and ask about books. We didn't even know this book existed. It's 10 years old. It's not in print. We've got to go and track this down, get somebody to reprint it or whatever it is, because someone found this book on a shelf, read it, talked about it. Now, how do we deal with that? If you want your book to be read, ideally you need to be putting it into an environment where people are saying, the book clubs say we're going to buy it. But we don't really encourage book clubs. Recently, South Africa had a whole big, the Department of Arts and Culture had this thing where they brought in people from book clubs together. Book clubs are a massive industry in the Afrikaner community. I spoke to the people 2 years ago at the book fair. I said, if you go to the library in the Bluff, or Durban Municipal Library hasn't been buying books, you go to the library in the Bluff, and I told them, you guys get a lot of books donated to you, and all of them are Afrikaans. And they said, yeah, how do you know that? Because once you've read the book, and you keep buying them, you're going to now have to get rid of them somewhere. Well, where am I going to go? Best place to go give it to the library. But that's not talking to the bulk of our audience. Where are the book clubs in Umlazi, Inanda, Chatsworth, Phoenix, We'll have book clubs sometimes in more affluent areas, but we're not creating that environment. And when we do have a book club, like I've seen with some people I know, they share the PDF. So, that's not encouraging. So the promotions part of it is an issue. And then we talk about place. Where is it available? It's on the website. It's not actually as convenient as people make it out to be, to go onto a website that sells one product, one place, and buy something. We don't, I use this example, we don't go and buy our cool beans from one shop and then go 2 shops down and then buy our toilet roll and then go another couple of shops down and buy our vegetables, right? We want to go to a supermarket, get everything in one basket, pay for it once and go. So when people say, I've published my book, I'm going to put it up on the website, and I'm going to say, people go to my website, there is a space for it. But it comes down to, are you getting people there? How are you getting people there? How do you market it? And is it not more confident in terms of, people are more confident if they say, this is a place where someone has curated the books, they've gone through them, they've looked at it, they think this is actually something worth keeping on the shelf. So it's multi-layered to this, and the whole process of marketing your books comes back to looking at it objectively. And I know it's very emotional. I deal with authors who come to me and say, I want you to sell my book. And as you said, it's the best book. It's going to be the next Harry Potter. Right? And it's a baby. It's their baby. If I wrote a book, I'd probably think, it's going to be the next Harry Potter. So when we start looking at that, we've got to then say, well, okay, you want me to keep your book. What am I going to pay for it? What am I going to sell it for? How much are you going to promote it? I've done this before, especially early on when I got into the business. People would come to me and say, great book. This person who wrote a book on finance. There's a self-published author. One of the books I absolutely loved that I would love to have seen grow was an author who came to me, Sanele Gumede, and he wrote a book about going to university. What you need to know about going to university. Why you need to go for tutorials, why you need a textbook, why you need to, choose your right friends. One of the points in there was choose your friends correctly, because if you choose the wrong friends, you're gonna fail. I think the book was called Graduating in 3 years, or how to succeed at your university degree or something of that sort. Loved the book. First thing I did is I opened the book and I said, Sanele, you haven't looked at how you lay out the book. You've got the wrong font, he printed 6,000 or 8,000 of these things. Now he's got all of these things sitting there, but he wants to get it out there. But where are we going to get it there? How are we going to do this? And the concept is great. But had he had an editor, had he had someone who told him this is what you need to do, had he had a machine behind him, and that's maybe where some of our smaller independent publishers come into play. They've got a role to play. But don't go out there and expect that because I wrote something, it's necessarily commercially viable. And because it is commercially viable, it's going to just sell by itself. It has to actually get out into the right place, and you've got to put it in front of people. And ways in front of people. So, and one of the previous discussions I mentioned, you write a book about soccer, there's no point in going and advertising it outside the Durban Playhouse. You've got to put it where people are going to play soccer.
That's for sure.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's for sure. No, and also about the price, you see, it's price sensitive, but you cannot, like you said, 5,900, and then people also will not buy the book.
Yes.
Because they'll think that, why is it so cheap? So from the pricing point of view, one has to be very aware of what's selling and what is the right price. Don't price it out of the market, but sometimes people also want that, yes, we bought this book and it's worth that amount of money.
It's again what we find repeatedly, and I know that I think this book fair may be a little bit more than others, encourages and invites and attracts a lot more of the self-published authors. And I think there's a desperate need for it. But part of the desperate need, and I think that's why Anivesh likes to get me to come in and maybe say some of the things that are not going to necessarily be popular with the authors, is because if you're going to do this, you then now have to actually understand the business of books. pricing is critical. Yeah, sorry, you had a question. There we go.
So I'm an author of a children's book.
Yes.
And I want to find out how pricing would work for that. So how would you know what would be the right price? Especially for children's books.
It depends on what you want to sell, right? If I told you, you know what, I'm introducing a new cell phone, what's the right price for that cell phone? Normally, and this is the habit of people, is, oh no, you look at cost plus pricing. It cost me so much to make it, therefore I'm add X amount. And as I said before, we don't factor in the actual creativity and the product and the time and the investment and it's like an academic book. The author has spent 40 years studying the subject from the time that the teacher was the parent was teaching them ABCs. That's actually the start of the process for them to be able to write the textbook on advanced fluid mechanics, right? It's all of that investment is what he's actually giving you. What's the price and what's the value? There's a lot of factors. One is, if you want to sell something, what's the rest of the market paying? Because the person's going to walk in and they see everything at 100 Rand and they see yours at 500 Rand or they see yours at 50 Rand. What is that going to influence their decision? So what is the right price is what is it comparable to? First thing. The second one is, what are you offering that is different? If you're offering, A's for apple, B's for banana, and somebody else goes, A's for angels and B's for, buckets, it's still in the same category, but what is different? Am I now doing this in a different language? Am I using different graphics? Am I using a touch and feel? What am I doing differently? If I'm doing the same thing, I'm doing the same thing. I'm competing with that book on a one-to-one basis. Then I'm competing on price. If I'm now going in there and I'm saying I'm doing something different, I'm talking to something that nobody's done before, that's a different issue. One of the things that is a massive gap in South Africa is we don't tell our own story. In Africa, we don't tell our own story. There's the author from Nigeria, Amanda, now forgotten the name, but she says, I grew up reading books about orange marmalade and snow. When I grew up in Nigeria, I should have been reading about mangoes and sunshine and that type of thing, and floods and rain. That's what we experience. We don't write our own stories. There's a reason that Housewives of Mzansi or Housewives of Durban or these stories on Netflix are now gaining a lot of popularity because I can relate to it. Hey, I've been there. I can see that. I know that person. And that's what happens with stories. If you want something to be, but then thereafter you've got to be able to write something that goes out of that market. So we've got 60 million people in South Africa. By estimate, the estimates are 1 million people buy a book. At least one book, or only, they're probably about half of them will buy more than one book. And those who buy more than one will buy lots more. I'll go buy, people who go and buy one every month. But in total, it's about 1 million people who buy books. 6 million people in the country, you've got 2% of the people who are buying books. If you can, how are you going to make money out of that? How do you as a bookseller say, I'm going to, you bring in your book, who am I going to sell it to? How long is it going to take you to sell it? And that's the part of this pricing decision. So to your price question, what is the person prepared to pay for it? It's not something that is tangible in terms of a weight. It's not something that's tangible in terms of, I can write something that's this thick, but if the value of that in there, and if I can convey a message in 50 pages that someone else is taking 600 to convey it. Okay, that should be worth more. Yeah. Sorry, Anivesh, yeah. I hope I've answered the question.
Sorry to interrupt there. I was just thinking, if you look at the bookshops, right? 5% of the books may be local writers, and 95% of the bookshops are written by international writers. My argument is, like you said, Dion Baylor is, and South African writers are, and creativity and South African human resources dominating throughout the world. Yet why are so few of our books selling in our bookshops? It's almost as if you have to go and market overseas to become known in South Africa.
Yeah. Shabnam Khan's a good example, right? I think she's well, she's on our so the Booksellers Association has a books what's it, Book of the Year award. She's on the list and on the short list in the final 4 or something of that sort, right? Shabnam Khan wrote her first book, I think, 10, 15 years ago. Then she wrote Onion Tears, and she built up, and her most recent one, which is The Ghost of something Manzil. Yes, right? Akbar Manzil, right. That book, she was explaining, so my wife's part of a book club. They invited her to come in and talk about her book. She explained the process, and she told them she went away to a retreat overseas to be able to sit and write, and her book has done much better overseas than it has done here. All of that comes down to one point. Is the market prepared to pay? If you tell me keep 20 South African books, I'll happily keep them. But then you want me to pay you for it. You want me to stock it, pay the insurance in case it gets damaged, or if I do damage it, you're going to want the money for it because it's not saleable. You want me to keep it and list it on my website, do all of those things. For what return? 10% on a book that you want to sell at 120 Rand. 12 Rands is what I'm going to get for what effort. Now, the price, if it goes up too high, is a problem. If it goes too low, it's a problem. Because then there's no incentive. And what is that value? And that's a pricing issue. It's a market issue. If we want to sell more books, our problem is not whether we can create the content. South Africa has had, if I remember correctly, 3 or 4 Nobel Prize for Literature or authors, right? We sit in the bottom of Africa. We've got 60 million people. We've got more Nobel Prize authors than some countries with massive resources and numbers. So we've got the talent. But sometimes what we're doing is we're not actually exposing it, and we're not creating an environment where people are willing to buy it. That's the big challenge. How do we promote it to say, come and pay money for this book? And making it cheap is not always the answer. Making it digital is not the answer. So at the Durban Book Fair, the National Reading Summit, the people from the organizations that are promoting reading are saying, we had this entire thing, we're going to go and we're going to give kids digital access and put things on apps, and Nalibali does this and so does that, and we've got all of these programs, and they're saying, actually, we're finding that reading on devices doesn't work for kids.
Yeah.
Activities.
It's a lot more for the experience. One of our booksellers, when we were having a chat about it, says, book is not about the words. It's about the tactile thing. It's about the feel. It's about that crack in the spine. It feels nice when you crack that spine or fold it over, right? There's a feeling to it. You remember what's on that page. When you're reading the page here, I'm sure some of us still remember some textbook that we studied from, which has got a picture on the right-hand side of, a heart or whatever, and what was written on. You're learning with different interfaces. You don't get that in the digital.
Nothing like turning of pages.
So what is the best way to get your books overseas then? To sell your books overseas?
Realistically, the easiest way for a South African, or the most effective way, is to get an international publisher.
Yeah.
But so let's say I'm published
Yeah.
here, I'm through a publishing company in South Africa. How do I?
Right. So then now we're getting into the next part of the distribution chain. And no, that's perfect. That's the way we need to go. So the conversation was about, what about book fairs? So what happens everywhere in the world is that they have book fairs that are more designed around distribution. So they have the Frankfurt Book Fair, London Book Fair. They used to be, one of the biggest in Africa used to be in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe had a phenomenal reading culture in the past. It all fell apart with the economy, etc. Right? And recently there was a book fair in Qatar. The Qatar Book Fair had 700,000 people going through it. 700,000 people in a country with a population of about 2 million or 4 million people. Project that in our 60 million people, we should have 7.5 million people coming to Durban International Book Fair, right? How do you get people to come in? But what happens at the book fairs is, especially at Frankfurt and London and some of the others, is the distributors from different countries come there. with the content that they are bringing and take away the content that is presented. So when I was in Norway, they were talking about the fair book that they published. One of the things that the Norwegian government does is they pay for books in Norwegian to be translated. So they fund the translation of the book, and then they take that and then they fund the process of going out there and selling it elsewhere in the world. So Sharjah has a book fair. I met the head of the Publishers Association or Booksellers Association from Sharjah. She happens to be the daughter of the Emir of Sharjah, and she set up this entire industry, etc. And she was saying that we want more people to come and present their books. Now it costs money. You go there with your book, you're going to present it. Other people are you're going to show it to all of these people from around the world. You've got to negotiate terms. You've got to have stock. You've got to have a distribution chain. So very often, that's where the publisher's role comes in that we don't look at. Because a publisher can go there with 50 books, not 3 or 5. An international publisher also will know how to apply for the grants that allow you to get back your money for traveling and accommodation for this, because it is considered export. Either we've got to create that infrastructure between ourselves to support one another, or we've got to then find somebody who does it and give it to them. But then that comes at a cost. Now, if you've priced your book at 150 Rand, 180 Rand, I saw some here at that kind of price points, how many do they have to sell to a global audience to recover the cost of just the flight, or not even the flight, the cost of shipping your sample copies there? Because you're going to take sample copies. You've got to give out a whole lot. So another example is Nyati, the River to the Sea book. What's his name? Nkosi. Sorry? Sorry, I've forgotten his name, right? But his River to the Sea book got attention because of exclusive books taking it off their shelves in a couple of the other bookstores when there was a complaint because of the title and what content. And then they all put it back on because it was a children's book. It talked to something that maybe wasn't appealing to everybody, but it became one of the best-selling books in the country. His book, we had people calling for it from the Netherlands. When we did send the book over, we included similar books from a South African publisher in the order. We asked them, can we give away a copy? Yeah, okay, no problem. So we gave away copies to these people, and they said, okay, we'll order another 5 of them. The next time they're ordering a top-up order. We do books for the National Biodiversity Institute. These guys write books on plants and insects and things like that. All of these things need to go out into the world, but they don't have the infrastructure to distribute. So we are doing that for them. How do you get your message out and how do you get out there? It's not easy to ship something across the world to another part of the world. There's freight charges, there's customs duties, there's tax, there's timing. A gentleman walked into our store just before I came in. He's from Eswatini. He wants a book, but we don't have it in stock. We're going to get it in 4 days, but he's leaving after the conference here in Durban in another 2 days. No problem, we'll ship it to you. We've exported a South African book, but we've got the infrastructure because we were able to give him a price. My team were able to give him a price for shipping it to Swaziland while he was standing there in about 3 minutes. The biggest slowdown was, where are you in Swaziland? No, I'm in Lebombo, Lebombo or something of that sort, but okay, try Manzini. It's not appearing on the shipping company list. How do you do that as an individual self-published author? We've had Chili Chocolate Chefs, the sisters, they do catering, right? They've published 2 cookbooks. And what happened was they actually said, we can't deal with the international orders. Can you guys help us when somebody wants to order it? We had people from Malaysia and the UK ordering it. We are essentially doing the distribution chain, but it's got to be viable for us. So you want your book internationally, find someone or team up with people and go there. Be prepared to be disappointed. But at the same time, be prepared that if you're successful, are you going to be able to turn out that stock quickly? Because that's where we also struggle. Somebody comes in and says, oh, I've got this, and say, okay, I can get you an order for 40. No, I don't have it in stock. I'm going to have to print them. How long is it going to take you? 3 weeks. I've had a situation with one of the authors where I got the order. He doesn't have the money. He sold his previous books, but he didn't run it like a business, so he spent the money that he earned from it. So now I've got to fund the printing of his book to fulfill the order and then pay him for it. So I'm basically doing the entire job except writing the book. But I must do it at a 5 or 10 or 15%. Not feasible. So booksellers want to help the authors, but we can't do it if it's not feasible. The same complaint you've got that I'm not making money from my book, despite the fact that I've put in all of this effort, is where the problem lies. So if you want to solve the problem, find more people to read.
On that note, we are running out of time, so I would like to thank Mohamed, thank the audience also for your participation, and he is still around for you to ask him questions. And it's been a very interesting discussion, and actually you put forward a point of view which most authors don't really think about as well. From the publisher's point of view, from the bookseller's point of view, like, everyone wants to see their books in bookstores, but I think nobody really thinks too much from that point of view. So that was very enlightening.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
I think why Innovation and I have these very long conversations when we do meet is because sometimes you have to have people who are going to tell you things that are going to be the uncomfortable stuff. Yeah.
And I'm sure the
And
audience...
I hope you all respect that. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but success comes from taking on the uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, and as they say, it's a reality check. Like, everyone writing a book thinks it's going to be the next Harry Potter, or it's going to make everybody, they're going to sell thousands. But write the book and get it out there, find the publisher, and get all the help
Quality.
you need. But also don't be shy to spend money, because you've spent money, time, effort, writing what your heart desires, and then you need to also put out the energy in terms of money, because then energy flows outward and then it comes back to you also. Maybe not instantly, but books will be bought with the help of a publisher. So thank you very much, and thank you for attending.